I didn't find out from him. That's the part that still burns. I found out from a press release. I was standing in the break room at St. Luke's Medical Center, microwaving leftover pasta, when one of the interns gasped and said, "Wait, isn't this your fiance?" My stomach dropped before I even turned around. There he was, Caleb Whitmore, smiling, arm wrapped around Savannah Kincaid, daughter of Senator Richard Kincaid. The headline read, "Whitmore Infrastructure announces strategic engagement with Kincaid family." Strategic engagement. I stared at the screen. My brain refused to process it. I was supposed to be marrying Caleb in 3 weeks. I had invitations mailed. My dress was altered. Our honeymoon flights were booked. "Claire," the intern whispered. I didn't cry. Not there. I walked calmly back to my locker, grabbed my phone, and dialed him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Then a text arrived. "We need to talk. I didn't want you finding out like this. Like this. Not like this." I drove to the condo we shared. The doorman wouldn't let me in. "Mr. Whitmore left instructions," he said apologetically. "Left instructions." When I finally convinced him to call upstairs, Caleb came down himself. Perfect suit, perfect expression. No guilt. "You could have warned me," I said quietly. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It moved fast." "What moved fast?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Savannah's father is backing the coastal redevelopment contract. It's generational money, Claire. Political protection, expansion into DC. You're marrying her for leverage. I'm aligning for growth." I laughed once. It sounded hollow even to me. "And what was I?" He hesitated. "That was my answer. You're incredible," he said carefully. "But you don't understand the scale I'm operating at." Scale. As if love had a market cap. I looked past him into the lobby mirror and barely recognized myself. 30 years old. Trauma nurse, orphan, built everything alone. I thought I'd finally been chosen. I was wrong. "The ring," he said gently. "Of course, family heirloom." I slid it off and placed it in his palm. "For the record," I said, "I did understand your scale. I just thought I mattered more than it." He didn't respond. I walked away with nothing but my purse and my pride. By that night, my belongings had been boxed. Not by him, by his assistant, every dress, every book, every framed photo, labeled and stacked by the door. My lease had ended. I'd transferred everything into the wedding. I had $312 in my checking account. So I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't. I called my older brother, Marcus Hale. We hadn't spoken in 11 months. He picked up on the second ring. "Claire?" I didn't mean to cry, but I did. 3 days later, I was on a plane to Seattle. Marcus didn't ask questions. He never does. He just said, "You can stay as long as you need." But I knew I wouldn't. I couldn't stay where everyone had seen the announcement, where nurses whispered, where patients asked about wedding dates. I needed distance. I just didn't know from what. The answer came in the form of an email. Subject line, private medical position, immediate placements. It was forwarded from a former attending physician. High compensation, discretion required, live-in. Isolated estate outside Port Townsend. Patient. Daniel Cross, age 38. Former CEO of Cross Maritime Defense Systems. Condition, spinal trauma following offshore accident. History of dismissing staff, length of employment for last 4 nurses, under 2 weeks. Salary, $15,000 per month. I read it twice, then a third time, and something inside me, something reckless and tired, whispered, "Why not?" I replied yes. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, steel and glass carved into the rock like a fortress. The gate opened before my rental car even stopped. A woman in her late 50s met me at the entrance. "Mrs. Adler," she said, estate director. She scanned me once. Efficient, clinical. "You're early." "I prefer it that way." "Good." The interview lasted 12 minutes. 2 questions about emergency response. One about discretion. One about loyalty. "Mr. Cross does not tolerate pity," she said flatly. "He does not tolerate incompetence. He does not tolerate weakness." "Good," I replied. "Neither do I." She studied me, then nodded. "You start immediately." I met him in a room that felt more like a war command center than a bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Ocean beyond. Storm clouds rolling in. Danielle Cross sat in a black wheelchair, back rigid, jaw set like stone. He didn't look broken. He looked furious. "So," he said without turning, "they found another one." "I'm not another one," I said. He pivoted slowly, sharp eyes. Unreadable. "They all say that." "I'm not here to inspire you." "Good," he replied, "because I don't need inspiration." We held eye contact longer than necessary, testing, measuring. He gestured toward a tablet on the side table. You've read the file, yes, and spinal injuries don't erase intelligence. His expression flickered, barely. Interesting. The first week was ice. He barely spoke. He refused certain exercises. He worked remotely on encrypted files for hours. At night, lights stayed on in the lower training room long after staff had retired. On the sixth night, I followed the sound. The private rehabilitation wing was dim, except for one strip of overhead lighting. And there he was, standing. Not steadily, not safely, but standing, gripping a suspension harness bolted to the ceiling, sweat soaked through his shirt, legs shaking violently. He didn't see me at first. Then he did. Get out, he snapped. You're overexerting. I said get out. You'll tear the nerve graft. That stopped him. His arms trembled harder. I don't need supervision. You do, if you plan to walk again. Silence, rage in his eyes. And something else, fear. I won't report this, I said evenly, but you don't get to self-destruct either. He lowered himself back into the chair, breathing hard. Everyone leaves, he muttered. Not everyone. Prove it. 2 days later, I met Victor Langford, Chief Operating Officer of Cross Maritime. Expensive suit, political smile. He leaned over Danielle's desk like he already owned it. We just need your approval on the restructuring, he said smoothly. It protects the board from liability. Danielle's jaw tightened. I'll review it. You've been reviewing it for weeks. Victor noticed me watching. And you are? His nurse. Temporary, Danielle added. Victor smiled thinly. You should encourage him to sign. Stress isn't good for recovery. Something in my chest went cold. That night, I asked Danielle directly, "What aren't you telling me?" He didn't answer. But he didn't dismiss me either. And for the first time, I realized this job wasn't just medical. It was strategic. And whatever Victor Langford wanted signed, Danielle Cross was the only thing standing in the way. Victor Langford didn't visit for conversation. He visited for signatures. I realized that on the third afternoon he came in wearing the same controlled smile and carrying a leather portfolio he never actually opened in front of Danielle. People like Victor don't persuade, they position. Investors are getting nervous, he said casually, pacing near the window. The board needs reassurance. The board needs patience, Danielle replied. Victor chuckled. Patience isn't a market strategy. I stood near the console, charting vitals, invisible but listening. There's a truth most people learn too late. When someone keeps repeating urgency, it's usually because delay weakens their advantage. Daniel wasn't delaying because he was confused. He was delaying because he sensed something. And Victor knew it. That night, Daniel didn't go to the gym. He stayed in his office, staring at projections on 3 monitors. You don't trust him, I said quietly. He didn't look up. Trust isn't relevant. Alignment is. That's corporate for no. His mouth twitched. Victor handled operations after the accident, he said. The board leaned on him. Media leaned on him. He stabilized things. And now he's restructuring voting shares into a risk protection trust. That doesn't sound illegal. It's not, he replied. If it's transparent. He finally turned toward me. Claire, when a company moves control quietly during a founder's medical absence, that's not protection. That's acquisition. A cold awareness spread through me. They think you're weakened. They're betting on it. Another truth settled in. People don't attack when you're strong. They wait until you're injured, physically, emotionally, financially, and call it opportunity. Over the next week, our morning rehab sessions became strategic briefings. He stood longer, walked 3 controlled steps without the harness, collapsed into the chair afterward, drenched and shaking. Healing isn't cinematic, it's ugly, frustrating, humbling. He hated every second of it. I built fleets, he muttered once through clenched teeth. Now I celebrate standing for 12 seconds. Perspective is brutal, I said. No, he corrected. Reality is. And then, softer. Strength you haven't tested yet isn't strength. It's ego. That one stayed with me. Victor escalated. Emails became formal notices. Board meetings scheduled without Daniel's preferred counsel. Subtle phrases like temporary governance adjustment started appearing in documents. Temporary is the most permanent word in corporate language. On Thursday evening, I walked into the study and found Daniel staring at a digital contract. They're moving faster, he said, because you're not signing. Yes. He zoomed in on a clause buried near the bottom. Voting rights transferable under medical incapacitation if majority board deems recovery uncertain. They're building a case that you're permanently disabled, I said. They're building optics. He looked at me carefully. Do you know why they always include a medical clause? Why? Because no one wants to look cruel. It's easier to remove a leader when you can say it was for his own good. I felt something sharp inside my chest. Caleb had said something similar. It's better for both of us. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely sounds violent. It sounds reasonable. 2 nights later, I found Daniel in the lower garage, standing without support, no harness, just gripping the hood of his own car. His legs trembled violently. You're pushing too hard, I said. I don't have time for gradual. You'll fall. Then I'll fall. He tried to step forward. His knee buckled. I caught him before he hit concrete. His weight hit my shoulder. For a second, we were just breathing. Close. Human, vulnerable. I hate being seen like this, he said quietly. Like what? Unfinished. I stepped back carefully. Everyone is unfinished. He shook his head. No, some people are interrupted. That hit harder than he probably intended, because I knew that feeling. Interrupted wedding. Interrupted future. Interrupted certainty. Here's another truth no one tells you. Interruption doesn't mean destruction. It means redirection. But you don't see that until later. Victor's next move came publicly. A press leak, speculation about Daniel's uncertain recovery timeline. Stock dipped 4% in a single day. Fear spreads faster than facts. Danielle watched the ticker in silence. Stock dipped 4% in a single day. Fear spreads faster than facts. Danielle watched the ticker in silence. Then he closed the laptop. They're testing whether I'll hide, he said. Will you? No, he looked at me with something new in his expression. Resolve. I'm calling a full board assembly. My pulse quickened. You're not ready. He gave me a steady look. I don't need to run a marathon. I need to walk into a room. Preparation became war. Not loud war, precise war. He contacted his original legal counsel, not the interim firm Victor had recommended. He requested medical documentation showing neurological improvement. He pulled archived communications, and one night at nearly 1 a.m., he handed me a tablet. Read this. It was an internal memo from Victor to 2 board members, dated 6 weeks after Daniel's accident. Subject, succession stabilization. One line stood out. Cross is unlikely to resume executive function at prior capacity. We must prepare contingency transfer discreetly. Executive function. They were labeling him cognitively compromised, not just physically injured. That wasn't contingency. That was character assassination. Why didn't you fire him then? I asked. Danielle's jaw tightened. Because when you're lying in a hospital bed with tubes in your lungs, you don't control the narrative. Silence. Then, never let someone manage your story when you can't speak. That was the clearest truth yet. The board meeting was set for Monday. Victor assumed it would finalize restructuring. He even sent Daniel a draft statement thanking him for graceful leadership during transition. Daniel forwarded it to me without comment. I understood the message. He wasn't stepping down. He was stepping forward. The morning of the meeting, he walked 15 steps unassisted, no cane, no harness, 15. He collapsed into the chair afterward, breath ragged. You don't have to prove anything physically, I said. I know. Then why push? He met my eyes. Because perception is leverage. There it was. The difference between weakness and power isn't strength, it's timing. That afternoon, Victor arrived early. He shook my hand, grip too firm. Claire, isn't it? He said. You've been influential. Medically, I replied. His smile thinned. You should encourage Daniel to think long-term. Stress events delay neurological repair. Funny, I said calmly. So does corporate betrayal. His eyes hardened for a fraction of a second. Then the mask returned. You're temporary, he reminded me. I didn't answer, because here's the truth. When someone feels the need to remind you that you're temporary, it's because they're afraid you're not. That night, Daniel knocked on my door. He never did that. When I opened it, he was standing. No support, slight sway, but standing. I can do it, he said. It wasn't arrogance. It was confirmation. I stepped aside so he could enter. He sat slowly. I've been thinking, he continued. After this meeting, regardless of outcome, I'm restructuring the company. Into what? Private, lean, no board majority power. That's drastic. So was nearly losing it. He studied me. And you? What about me? When this ends, what do you want? No one had asked me that since the engagement. I swallowed. I don't want to be chosen because I'm convenient, I said. And I don't want to be discarded because I'm not strategic. He held my gaze. That won't happen here. I believed him, but belief is dangerous, so I answered carefully. I don't need promises. I need alignment. A slow nod. Good, he said. So do I. The board meeting was 48 hours away. Victor thought he was closing a deal. He had no idea he was walking into exposure. And for the first time since the press release shattered my life, I felt something powerful rising inside me. Not revenge, not romance, clarity. Here's the final truth for tonight. When someone underestimates you during your lowest season, they're building the stage for your comeback. They just don't know it yet. The morning of the board meeting, the sky over Puget Sound was steel gray. Fitting, storms don't always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they arrive quiet and controlled. Danielle dressed slowly, tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. He refused the wheelchair. You don't have to prove anything, I reminded him again. I'm not proving, he said calmly. I'm correcting. There's a difference. Correction is strategic. Proof is emotional. He took the cane, but he barely leaned on it. Cross Maritime headquarters was all glass and maritime blue steel, sharp lines, cold ambition. The kind of building that makes investors feel safe and employees feel replaceable. Victor was already inside the executive conference room when we entered. Board members lined the table, 2 legal representatives, a CFO who couldn't meet Danielle's eyes, and Victor. Perfect posture, confident smile, the smile of a man who thinks the vote is secured. Conversation died when Danielle walked in, not rolled, walked, measured, controlled. The cane tapped once against the marble floor. Victor blinked, just once. You're mobile, he said carefully. Improving, Danielle replied. He didn't sit at the side. He walked to the head of the table and stood there. No rush, no theatrics, just presence. Here's a brutal truth most people ignore. When you walk back into a room stronger than when you left it, you don't need to raise your voice. Your existence becomes the statement. Shall we begin? Danielle said. Victor cleared his throat and launched into his prepared narrative. Market volatility, investor anxiety, leadership continuity, medical uncertainties. He spoke smoothly, confidently, like a man reading a eulogy he wrote himself. Then he slid the restructuring packet across the table. Today's vote ensures stability. Danielle didn't touch the folder. Instead, he nodded toward the screen at the far end of the room. The general counsel dimmed the lights. A document appeared. Victor's internal memo, subject line glowing in sharp white letters, succession stabilization, executive incapacity assessment. A ripple of unease moved across the table. Victor didn't flinch. That was preliminary risk planning, he said evenly. 6 weeks after my accident, Danielle replied. While I was sedated. Another slide, email threads. Language suggesting cognitive decline. Language recommending accelerated transfer of decision rights. One board member shifted uncomfortably. Danielle's voice stayed level. You weren't protecting the company, you were positioning it. Victor's smile faded slightly. Intent is interpretation. Breach of fiduciary duty is not. Silence. Then Danielle stepped forward. No cane. Just 2 slow steps. You could hear fabric shift in chairs. Victor's eyes dropped briefly to Danielle's legs. Perception is leverage. Danielle had been right. You leaked medical uncertainty to the press, Danielle continued. You prepared external counsel without notifying primary legal authority, and you initiated voting reallocation under contested capacity language. Victor leaned back. And yet here you are, he said coolly. Still injured, still unstable. Danielle didn't react emotionally. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small device, remote. The next slide appeared. Updated neurological evaluation. Signed by 2 independent specialists. Clear cognitive and motor recovery trajectory. Expected executive function retention. The board's general counsel adjusted his glasses. This changes the incapacitation threshold, he murmured. Victor's jaw tightened. You're not fully recovered, Victor pressed. No, Danielle agreed, but I'm competent. Then came the final slide. Banking records. Shell entities. Indirect compensation agreements tied to accelerated restructuring. The room went still. Personal financial gain, Danielle said softly. That's your contingency. Victor stood abruptly. This is outrageous. No, Danielle replied. This is documentation. Another truth settled heavily in the room. Power without integrity always leaves fingerprints. The vote happened fast. When trust fractures publicly, self-preservation kicks in. Board members don't defend the architect of exposure. They distance. Unanimous motion for removal pending investigation. Victor didn't argue further. He gathered his folder slowly, composed, controlled. But his eyes were colder now. You think this makes you stronger? He asked Danielle quietly. No, Danielle said, it makes me accurate. Victor's gaze flicked to me. You've been whispering in his ear. I met his stare evenly. No, I've been listening. He held my gaze 1 second too long. Then he walked out. And just like that, the man who tried to take the company left without applause. No security escort, no dramatic scene, just quiet removal. Sometimes justice isn't loud, it's procedural. When the room cleared, Daniel finally exhaled. Not triumphant, not celebratory, just steady. You didn't have to stand the entire time, I said softly. He looked down at his legs. They needed to see it. Why? Because recovery changes narrative. He leaned lightly against the table now. I'm not the wounded founder anymore. I'm the returning one. Returning. That word held weight. Back at the estate, silence felt different, lighter, open. Daniel sat across from me in the study. No screens, no files, just quiet. I owe you acknowledgement, he said. For what? For not treating me like a symbol. I tilted my head, meaning everyone else either saw a liability or a hero. You saw a man. That landed deeper than I expected. There's a truth people rarely admit. Being admired is lonely. Being understood is rare. I didn't save you, I said. You didn't need to, he replied. You stood with me. A pause. Then, most people leave when things stop being impressive. I thought about Caleb, about press releases and alignment. I'm not impressed by titles, I said quietly. I'm impressed by resilience. His expression softened. Not romantic, not dramatic, just real. Weeks passed. Victor's investigation expanded. Danielle initiated structural reform within the company, reduced centralized board power, increased operational transparency. No more medical override clauses without dual independent review. He was building safeguards from his own near destruction. That's another uncomfortable truth. The strongest leaders are usually the ones who almost lost everything. Physically, he improved steadily, short distances without the cane, strength training under supervision, less frustration, more patience, and one evening, while watching the sun drop over the water, he asked, "Why did you stay?" It wasn't a flirtation, it was a question. I considered my answer carefully. Because I've been discarded before, I said, and I decided I wouldn't discard someone just because they weren't at their peak. He studied me, and if I hadn't recovered, I still would have stayed through the process, I said honestly, but I wouldn't stay out of obligation. He nodded slowly. Good. Why good? Because dependency masquerading as loyalty destroys both people. That was the clearest boundary yet, and I respected it. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, he surprised me. I'm stepping down as active CEO, he said. My heart jumped. What? Not because I'm forced, because I'm choosing to. He folded his hands calmly. I built this company from survival instinct. I want to rebuild it from vision. You're still majority shareholder, yes, but I don't want to cling to control because I almost lost it. There it was again. Another truth. Clinging after survival is fear. Choosing after survival is power. He looked at me carefully. And you? What about me? When your contract ends in 2 months, what do you want? That question again. Different tone. No expectation behind it. Just respect. I want to open a trauma recovery clinic, I said quietly, for patients who don't have investors backing their healing. He didn't react immediately. Then spilled it. I blinked. I'm not asking you to stay because of me, he clarified. I'm asking if you want partnership. Not romance. Partnership. That word hit differently. Slow, intentional, earned. Later that night, alone in my room, I thought about everything. Caleb choosing leverage, Victor choosing opportunity, Daniel choosing correction. 3 men, 3 responses to power. Here's the truth that crystallized for me. Character isn't revealed when things are easy. It's revealed when power shifts. Caleb gained power and abandoned loyalty. Victor saw weakness and exploited it. Daniel regained power and restructured it. That difference matters. 2 weeks later, Daniel walked half a mile without assistance. No announcement, no press, just us on the cliff path overlooking the water, wind sharp against our faces. He paused halfway, not from collapse, from reflection. You know what's strange, he said. What? I thought walking again would feel like victory. And it feels like balance. I smiled slightly. Victory is loud, I said. Balance is quiet. He looked at me differently then. Not with gratitude, not with dependency, but recognition. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider something dangerous. Not rescue, not rebound, not replacement, but alignment. I used to wait for the right moment. the perfect timing, the perfect mood, the perfect version of myself. But here's the truth, no one told me perfection is just procrastination, wearing a fancy outfit. I wasted years thinking I needed more confidence before I started, more money before I tried, more support before I moved. But confidence doesn't come before action. It comes because of action. Nobody is coming to save me. That was the hardest lesson of my life. I thought someone would notice my potential. I thought someone would push me. I thought someday I'd magically feel ready. But readiness is a myth. Growth is uncomfortable. Discipline is boring. Success is repetitive. I had to face something painful. The life I wanted required a version of me I wasn't willing to become. I said I wanted change, but I loved comfort more. I said I wanted success, but I feared failure more. I said I wanted respect, but I avoided responsibility. That was my wake-up call. The world doesn't reward intentions. It rewards execution. And here's another truth. Nobody is thinking about me as much as I think they are. People are too busy worrying about themselves. The fear of judgment? Mostly imaginary. Every time I blamed circumstances, I was giving away power. Every excuse felt good in the moment, but it built regret over time. I realized something. Pain is guaranteed, but I get to choose my pain, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. I stopped asking, what if I fail? I started asking, what if I stay the same? That question changed everything, because staying the same is slow self-betrayal. So now, I move even when I don't feel like it. I act even when I'm unsure. I show up even when nobody claps. And here's the final truth. Motivation fades. Identity lasts. When I stopped trying to feel motivated and started deciding who I am, everything shifted. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who finishes. I am someone who grows. And once I decided that, my actions followed. The world didn't change overnight, but I did, and that was enough.